But then comes the day of, then what? Then Jesus appeared. And when he appeared, the solution was there. He lived a life as a second Adam. He lived a life as a completed Israelite. He died the sacrificial death, fulfilling the role of the Lamb. He was raised from the dead, defeating the last power on the earth. He ascended to the right hand of the Father to be the Adam, to be the man who would rule that God would rule through on the earth. He sent the Holy Spirit to live inside of the believers and then sent them out to push back darkness everywhere. And they lived happily ever after. So the Bible is a fantastic story, starting with that promise. So let's run through it right quick. So if I were going to give a title to what we're talking about today, I would say, The Story Plus One. Because I want to tell you the biblical story. I want you to go through it with me. And then I want to take a story out of the Bible and illustrate how we are to interpret stories. Okay? You with me so far? Okay, let's take the big story. And you'll notice how it follows that little pattern I gave you. So God makes a promise in the Garden of Eden. I'm going to crush the head of Satan with the instrument of human instrumentality. So he promises this deal. Then we have the story of Noah. The world had gotten so wicked after sin came into it that God said, I'll start over, but I'll rescue a remnant, and through that remnant I'll begin again. So he is continuing his promise that one day he will crush the head of Satan. After Noah and his family, there was a time passed, God appears to a guy named Abram over in Ur of Chaldees and says to him, I'm going to pick your family, you and your natural family, to be the family that produces the seed that crushes the head of Satan. So we have the story of Abraham becoming Abraham, and Sarah. They have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. One day, there's a famine that came up. God is setting Israel up for deliverance so he can show his glory. So they run down to Egypt to try to survive the famine. They wind up staying in Egypt for 400 years, which lets you know that it's a good idea for you not to try to negotiate time with God. He's got more than you do, so he can outweight you. So 400 years of God setting the table for a time when he wanted to demonstrate his true nature of deliverance. So he let them stay down for 400 years, and then things got really bad, and they began to cry out, and God delivered them from Egypt through the Red Sea into the land that he was to give them. So they lived in that land, and God said, I will be your God, and you'll be my people. I'll be the king. And but they had a hard time with that. They would follow God for a while, and then they would go over to other gods. So it was the time that the Bible calls the Judges. Remember that book? Several cycles of Israel promising God they would do better, and him delivering them from one of the other nations, and then they'd go back. And so these judges were deliverers, all pointing to a time when God would send an ultimate judge who would deliver them. So they stayed there for 320 years, thereabouts. And then they got to thinking they would like to have a king, because all the other nations had kings. So they asked about having a king, and God said, well, I'm actually your king, but okay. So he lets them pick a king, and they pick Saul, and Saul turns out not to be such a great king. So God picks him a king, and he picks David, and David turns out to be a really good king. In fact, God said he's a man after my own heart. And David was a picture of another king that was going to come one day who would be even greater than David. But the kingdom aspect got introduced to the story here. Now we've got the people of God who have a king, and they also have a covenant. And God has said, if you will obey the covenant, I'll bless you, make you the head, not the tail, the lender, not the borrower. You'll win and not lose. You'll always have plenty and never lack if you'll just obey my commands. And they said, we'll do it, we'll do it, we'll do it, we'll do it. And because they didn't understand how sinful their heart was. And so they gave it a try, but they wound up not doing it. And God being faithful to his covenant that had said, if you disobey, I'll make you the tail and not the head. I'll make you the borrower, not the lender. I'll make you lack and not have prosperity. I'll make you sick and not well. And so they lost their land. They lost their temple. They lost everything because they were taken under the power of Babylon,